Alright everybody, welcome back! So if you've been keeping up to date with the War Thunder news, you'll have seen that recently Gaijin announced that they were both marking 50% off and removing some older Golden Eagle premiums. This seems great at first glance until you actually take a look and you see that, well, the F-89D is actually locked behind the F-89B. So to unlock this thing, you first have to Golden Eagle the F-89B, which they of course did not actually mark down. This means that, technically, this is actually more expensive, even on sale, than the Rank 7 pack premiums in the Gaijin store. If you account for the Golden Eagles and the premium time that comes with the vehicle in the pack, well, the vehicle costs around $46, slightly less than this thing will cost you, even at 50% off right now. And what do you get for that exorbitant price? Well, to be honest, it's a pretty terrible vehicle nowadays. Way back when, this thing used to be absolutely incredible. It would nuke planes left and right, but has suffered a series of nerfs that have left in a really bad position. The biggest thing, and what I'm going to start off with, is of course the weapons kit, because this is what sets it apart from basically every other jet in the game. This has no guns, and unlike other jets like the Sea Vixen, it also has no guided missiles. The only thing it has to actually shoot down enemy aircraft are unguided rockets. In this case, they're the FFAR Mighty Mouse M439, which do have a proximity fuse. That is, of course, much better than just having dumb rockets, which, by the way, on release, this thing did only have dumb rockets, and it was even worse than it is right now. But regardless, they're called a proximity fuse. You do still have to get them close to the target, and that is where the issue lies. Gaijin, I don't know how long ago it was now, maybe like a year or two ago, changed how rocket pods work and how their dispersion works. And so even when you're flying in a straight line, they are now much less accurate than they used to be. And that is when you're flying in a straight line. Take a look at this right here. See how far behind the plane they're firing, even when I'm just pulling a small amount of AOA. The only way I can reliably aim these rockets now is basically if they're in a head-on. Most of my kills were from people going full commit head-on with me and actually just flying into my rockets. And all they have to do is just pull off when they see me salvoing off the rockets, and there's pretty much nothing I can do. If a target actually starts turning while they're in front of me, even if we ignore the flight performance of the plane, which I'll get onto here in a little bit, there is a very real possibility that I simply will not be able to aim these things because they just seem to go wherever they want to, especially when you're pulling AOA. They also don't seem to cope very well with sudden changes in velocity direction of the aircraft, and so in a second you're going to see I'm going to fire a bunch of rockets at this Oregon in a head-on, and while I do get the kill, even with me moving my rudder to the right, the rockets barely change direction. Luckily, he flies straight into it, and so I do actually get the kill, but this is a great example of exactly what I'm talking about. You're basically forced to play the long game in these and extend away and turn back around and hope that people will actually take a head-on. And if they don't, well, you're probably just out of luck because you're almost certainly not going to be able to actually hit stuff with these rockets, at least reliably. The one small upside to using these rockets is that they do have some pretty spectacular range for the BR, so if you get lucky, you may be able to hit shots at 2, sometimes 3 kilometers rear aspect, and especially a head-on, you can definitely fire these at 3, 4, sometimes 5 kilometers, depending on what exactly you're shooting at. Even if you do actually manage to hit, there is a very good chance that you will do precisely nothing to the enemy aircraft because, well, these rockets aren't exactly the most lethal. There will be many times, like in the background, where your rockets get very close to the target, explode, and then you don't even get a hit. These rockets have a 20-meter fuse distance, which is larger than most missiles. For example, the AIM-9D has a 5-meter proximity fuse, despite the fact that the 90 has a much larger warhead. And even if you do actually manage to get it close enough that when it explodes it does some damage, there's a very good chance you only get a hit or a crit, because these things, like I said, have a very small amount of explosive mass. This clip from earlier is actually perfect to demo this. I get several rockets all within explosive distance, and all that happens is I get a hit and stuff falls off. You also can't shotgun them from basically point-blank range because they have to fly for half a second before that proximity fuse comes on. So you either have to get a direct hit at very close range, or it just simply does not work. And even when you do get a direct hit, like I did right there, you may just get a hit. Now, of course, in this case, it did actually set them on fire, so I was okay, but You get the idea. These rockets are not reliable at all. And that's before we get to the flight performance, which, as you may have noticed, does not feel good at all at 7.0. Although it does have an afterburner, and if you get it up to relatively high speed, you will be able to outclimb most stuff at the battle rating, assuming you hold your higher speed. That's really the only advantage that this thing has. It's got a lot of problems. The first of which is that it is pretty heavy. It's actually 800 kilograms heavier than the F-89D that came before that. And by the way, we're just talking about the airframe. Keep that in mind for later. While also having worse thrust at most of the relevant flight areas. The F-89D has better thrust below around 350 kilometers an hour, so almost stall speed, and better thrust above 800 kilometers an hour, which we'll get to here in a second. That means that normal flight speed between, around 350 to 800 kilometers an hour or so, the F-89B actually has better thrust at those speeds. And I'm not talking about thrust to weight ratio, I'm talking about thrust. When it comes to thrust to weight ratio, the F-89B is better at every speed until around 830 kilometers an hour. So at almost every relevant speed, the F-89B will turn better, retain energy better, and accelerate better, while actually having competent weapons. And do you remember how I said that the F-89D had that high-speed energy advantage above around 800 to 830 kilometers an hour? Well, it doesn't even really get to use that, because one of the main weaknesses of the F-89 series is that they actually rip their wings at 920 kilometers an hour. So if you actually try to use that high-speed energy performance that the F-89D has, well, there's a very good chance you'll rip off both your wings and either not be able to make it back to base like I just did, or lose part of your armament, because remember, they are on the wingtips. And that's not even getting the fact that running these rockets actually increases your weight by a whopping 800 kilograms more. That is a lot of weight, adding about the same amount more as what the plane already is heavier than the F-89B, and that is what you have to use to try and climb and accelerate when you're getting into the battle, making this thing just feel even more lethargic. Basically, if you are going to be using it, you're going to want to try and stay level and fast as much as possible, boom and zoom. Basically, don't do what I'm doing in the background right here. It's just not a very fun jet, and you also can't push engagements, you can't clutch gains, you can't actually do stuff that will, make a difference. And you get all this for $50 US. The best part is you don't even get to club props or V29s or anything like that. Almost every game that I had was a full up tier to 8.0. I got a single down tier into 6.7. So just to recap, we have a plane with unreliable and honestly bad weapons that has mediocre flight performance, that is also incredibly expensive, and is getting up tier constantly. Great combo, don't you think? It is at least somewhat better for CAS because you can swap out the proxy Mighty Mouse rockets for the heat ones, and you do of course get HVARs as well, which are pretty good for killing, unarmored or open targets. But with the Mighty Mouse rockets, the problem comes down to the fact that, well, you still have the massive accuracy issues, and the rockets are way outboard of the wing, so most of the time, if one rocket is hitting, the other one is going to be way off of the target. It makes it very difficult to hit reliably any ground targets with this thing, and honestly, I would just take the F-89B with its 20 mils and run ground targets, and then, just go top down on people. I think you'd have a much better experience with it. That's not even talking about all the other different options that the US has for CAS in and around this battle rating, which are all much better if you ask me. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video and my suffering in the background, and I would not let the fear of missing out control you into buying this thing, even 50% off, because it's just very, very much not worth it if you ask me. But in any case, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch y'all next time. So, peace, y'all.